The Legacy of Captain Timmy Williams. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Attic. The attic air hung thick and heavy, a tapestry woven with the scent of dust, mothballs, and forgotten time. For Darwin, 14, it was a place of whispered secrets and towering shadows. He crouched between stacks of yellowed newspapers and discarded furniture, his fingers tracing the spines of old books, each one a promise of adventure, waiting to be unlocked. Henry, 16, his gaze sharper, moved with a restless energy, scanning the room for anything that seemed out of place. Nate, 17, the pragmatic one, sighed, his flashlight beam dancing over the clutter. Martin, 18, the eldest and the glue that held them together, stood near the attic door, a quiet watchfulness in his eyes. Their grandfather, Jeremiah Williams, had been a legend in their small town, a treasure hunter whose tales of daring escapes and hidden riches had filled their childhood nights. His death 6 months earlier had left a void in their lives, and tonight, in the dusty confines of his attic, they felt closer to him than they had since he was gone. He always said the greatest treasures weren't gold or jewels, Darwin murmured, more to himself than the others. They were the adventures themselves. Yeah, and adventures he always kept from us, Henry added, running his hand across a tarnished brass telescope. He remembered the glint in their grandfather's eyes as he had recounted his past. Always said we were too young. Well, we are not kids anymore, Nate declared, frustration creeping into his voice. He had always felt a peculiar pull towards their grandfather's stories. He left this behind, did not he? We deserve to look. Martin nodded, his gaze fixed on the floorboards. They had been meticulous in their search, guided by an unshakable belief that Jeremiah had left them something more than memories. It was then that Martin spotted it, a small wooden chest tucked away behind a stack of old carpets. Hope surged through them as they heaved the heavy chest into the center of the room. The wood was dark, almost black, with intricate carvings that seemed to depict a long-forgotten language. With trembling hands, Martin carefully opened it. Inside, nestled amongst dried herbs and leather-bound journals, was a rolled-up piece of parchment, tied with a faded crimson ribbon. It was a map. Chapter 2, The Pirate's Parchment. The map was unlike anything they had ever seen. The parchment was aged, crackled, but the ink remained surprisingly vivid. It depicted a coastline they vaguely recognized, dotted with jagged rocks and hidden coves. Strange symbols, almost like glyphs, were scattered across the map. But what caught their attention most was the name, scrawled in bold, confident letters at the top. Captain Timmy Williams. Timmy Williams, Darwin repeated softly, his brow furrowed. I do not remember Grandpa ever talking about a Timmy Williams. Maybe a relative? Or a pirate he once faced, Henry pondered. Nate, ever the pragmatist, was already studying the map more closely. Look, these coordinates, he said, pointing to a series of numbers written in the margin. They are different from anything we have seen of Grandpa's. I wonder if they are coordinates for something. Martin felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He knew his grandfather had secrets, but this was more than they had ever anticipated. Captain Timmy Williams was indeed a relative. He was our great-great-grandfather, a pirate actually. Martin said, his gaze sweeping across every corner of the map. Grandpa told me about him in his last days. He said he was a bad man, but hid some pretty big treasures. He looked at his brothers with determination. We owe this to Grandpa and us. That night, the boys pored over the map, their excitement mixing with a sense of trepidation. They knew this wasn't just a whimsical adventure. It was a connection to their family history, a legacy that they were now tasked with unraveling. They spent hours researching Captain Timmy Williams, finding mentions of him in old books and online forums dedicated to pirate lore. He was a ruthless buccaneer, known for his cunning and his rumored stash of treasure hidden somewhere along the coast. This is insane, Nate said. Are we being too naive? Maybe, but we are going to do it anyway, Henry exclaimed. Chapter 3. Decoding the Clues. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and research. Nate, with his analytical mind, managed to decipher the strange symbols on the map, finding them to be a combination of nautical flags and a pirate code used by Timmy Williams and his crew. They learned of a hidden code marked on the map as Serpent's Tooth Bay, which was said to be the pirate captain's last known location. "We should pack up tomorrow," Martin said. "Tomorrow?" Question mark. Darwin raised his voice. "Are we crazy? We have to do it, and it is best to leave now before we lose our nerve," Martin said. Henry had already been preparing, assembling a bag with all sorts of essentials, from first aid kits to ropes. He showed them a compass he got from the market and an old radio. Darwin, despite his initial reservations, was caught up in the excitement, spending hours going through their grandfather's old journals, searching for anything that might offer additional insight. The night before their departure, the four brothers gathered in the living room, the weight of their endeavor heavy in the air. They knew they were stepping into the unknown, following in the footsteps of a long-dead pirate, but they were united by a bond that went beyond blood. Chapter 4. Serpent's Tooth Bay. The drive to the coast was long and tense. The roads were winding and unfamiliar. The further they got, the more they were unsure if they could. Serpent's Tooth Bay was exactly as the map depicted, a secluded cove surrounded by jagged cliffs and dense woods. The air was thick with the smell of salt and damp earth. They found a place to park the old Jeep their grandfather had left them, a few yards into the forest. The sun was slowly beginning to set. The brothers prepared the best they could before heading into the bay. The brothers worked as a team. Martin took the lead, his eyes darting from the map to the landscape. Henry, with his athleticism, navigated the rocky terrain, while Nate focused on their surroundings, always on the lookout for potential danger. Darwin, fueled by his boyish sense of wonder, was eager to explore every nook and cranny. Following the map's instructions, they located a small, barely visible cave entrance, hidden behind a waterfall. The entrance was dark, damp, and the air smelled musty. With flashlights in hand, they ventured into the unknown. The cave narrowed quickly, and they were forced to walk single file, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The cave was filled with peculiar formations and dark, damp rock. It wasn't long before they reached a dead end. "This can't be it," Nate yelled, frustrated. "It does not make sense," Henry said. "The map clearly indicates that this is the end point." Darwin, who had been quiet, slowly walked to the wall and placed his hand on it. He started pushing and prodding the wall. After a few minutes, he slowly pushed in a small brick, revealing a small hole. "Well, that is something," Nate said excitedly. They shined their light in the hole and found a lever. Martin hesitantly pulled the lever. The wall gave a loud creak and slowly started to move aside, revealing a dark passage. Chapter 5. The Captain's Legacy. The passage was narrow, and they felt a drop in temperature. As they moved forward, they were welcomed by a huge chamber. The walls were adorned with faded paintings of sea battles and maps of forgotten lands. In the center of the chamber, mounted on a stone pedestal, was an old chest that looked like it could fall apart if anyone touched it. With bated breath, they approached the chest. It was smaller than they expected, but the weight was heavy. Martin carefully opened the chest, and inside, they found not gold or jewels, but a small, leather-bound journal. They looked at each other, slightly disappointed, but then realized that this might have been what they had been searching for all along. The journal belonged to Captain Timmy Williams himself. It spanned years of entries, detailing his life as a pirate, his exploits, and his growing regrets. Reading through its pages, they learned more about the man who had once been so mysterious to them. In the final pages, Captain Timmy wrote about his hidden treasure. Not gold, not jewels, but artifacts of value. He left hints in his journal that led to many locations. The boys looked at each other, a sense of purpose washing over them. They had discovered the pirate's secret treasure, and they knew this was just the beginning for them. They were about to embark on a treasure hunt that would lead them to many places and change them forever. They felt the legacy of their great-great-grandfather surging through their veins. They were no longer just the grandsons of Jeremy Williams. They were the inheritors of a pirate's legend. They knew their journey had just begun.